Meanwhile, only an hour or so's drive from here, shocked Gazans are still picking through the rubble after the massive Israeli assault, said to have cost 1,300 or more Palestinian lives. During the hectic fighting last month, the world's media wasn't allowed into Gaza, but Dateline's newest recruit, Evan Williams, still managed to pull together his report for tonight's program, with a little help, it should be said, from our local producer inside Gaza City. Here's Evan, and a warning though, there are some pretty disturbing images in his report.
When the siren sounds, you have 15 seconds to find cover, even if it's just a gutter. Israel says as many as 750,000 Israelis have lived under the threat of rocket attack for the past 8 years. Right, so that was an incoming rocket from Gaza into Ashkelon.
And then, boom, into that wall over here.
This is what a Qassam rocket does when it hits a house. The owner of this building, Etty, is going inside for the first time since her home was hit. Etty's daughter, Mazzy. This is her bedroom. Despite the rocket attacks, I still wasn't prepared for the depth of anger this family felt towards Palestinians.
צריכים לשרוף אותם חיים, גם עם המשפחות וגם עם הילדים. פשוט להשמיד אותם.
There's another siren, another 15 seconds to find safety. We all run for the family shelter. Because of the rockets, the council in the southern Israeli city of Ashkelon now operates out of an emergency command centre, an underground bunker. They've had enough of the rockets, the fear and the stress, and they want Israel to strike back.
We were turning the other cheek until it reached an intolerable situation. I mean, think about it. If Perth or Melbourne or even a small village in Australia was hit by enemy fire, they would expect that the citizens would expect that the state would respond immediately.
On December the 27th, Israel did respond. A bombardment from the sea, land and air before a ground assault led by tanks. Its stated objective, stop the rockets, but many believe the massive attack was really aimed at removing Hamas, the hardline Islamist organisation that has for 2 years ruled the Gaza Strip. International media, barred by Israel from entering Gaza, were reduced to peering over the border. But as the attack continued, Dateline made contact with an old colleague on the other side of the wire. This is Rayeed Al Atamna. He's lived and worked in Gaza all his life. He owns a taxi and helps television reporters produce their stories. He risked his life to get these images to Dateline. This is the scene at the local hospital. Outside, he found men frantically searching for friends and relatives. Inside, the bodies of dead children were hastily stored in the morgue before the next attack, when more dead and injured would arrive. Almost 2/3 of Gaza's population are women and children, and as the extent of the civilian toll found its way to the media, it triggered outrage around the world. Like many here, Rayeed has seen his share of grief.
I don't know, just I see it full of pieces.
In 2006, an Israeli tank shell destroyed his house, wreaking havoc on his extended family.
بعد اللي حدث قبل سنتين في بيتنا ومن اهلي من اسرتي 20 نفر، كنت اتمنى انه انا اسكن المنطقه هذه لانه احس اولادي بالامان، فاصبحت المنطقه قطاع غزه غير امن، كله غير امن. هي تل الهواء اللي كنت بتامل اني اسكنها. هذه منطقه تل الهواء اللي كنت بتمنى اسكنها، وما كنتش غير متوقع الدبابات الاسرائيليه تصل للمنطقه هذه. كنت بحس ان الناس هذول عايشين بنعيم وبجنه واحنا نفسنا عايشين بالنار. فالان فيش اي فلسطيني عايش بنعيم، كله مستهدف، كله معرض للموت.
As Israeli forces pushed into Gaza, more and more civilians tried to flee the attack. And as Rayeed was out working for Dateline, he received another blow. The Israelis had struck at his latest house.
في اليوم الثامن تم قصف بيتي بصاروخ من الإسرائيليين، فخرجت أجري على بيت عند أبوي بجواري. صبحنا 37 نفر من غير أي مؤهلات للحياة. والدي مصاب بالسكري وأمي وأخوي.
As fighting erupted all around them, the entire household of 37 had to flee.
حملنا أطفالنا ومشينا ما يقارب حاملين راية بيضاء و2 كيلومتر حتى وصلنا منطقة فيها سكان ونشوف فيها بشر، لأنه إحنا كنا بعيشة موت حقيقي. الموت كان محقق وما كناش نحلم إنه إحنا نضلنا عايشين. لما خرجنا على الساحة في الخارج كل الناس كانت تعرف عنا أخبار إنه إحنا كنا البيت مهدوم بينا ومعدومين، والحمد لله هذه حياتنا وهذه قصتنا كشعب فلسطيني في قطاع غزة.
During one of the brief lulls, Rayeed found people desperately searching for safety.
شوف هاي بعض الناس بترحل زي ما ترحلت أنا، وبيحملوا حتى الناس بس بياخذوا حتى غطا من البرد لأنه الجو برد كثير. أنا طلعت من بيتي ما امتلكش الغطا اللي بتحمله المرأة هاد أو الرجل هاد. أنا طلعت من بيتي ما امتلكش الغطا هذا اللي أحمي أولادي من البرد.
This is the suburb of Zaytun. More than 60 people sought shelter in a house here, encouraged, they say, by Israeli soldiers. What happened next may end up being one of the conflict's most serious breaches of international humanitarian law. As they huddled together in the house, it was shelled by the Israeli military, leaving 40 people dead. Soon after the bombing, I sought the Israeli government's response to claims that the house was deliberately targeted.
I need to be very clear on this because, there are people in hospital, in Shifa Hospital, who claim to be survivors and claim that, 40 people were killed in there.
Nobody from the Red Cross saw it with his own eyes or was present there. What they're saying is that this is a hearsay. People told us that this has happened.
Okay, so you don't think the official position is it didn't happen at all?
If people were injured or killed that day, it didn't happen in that house in Zaytun.
Right. Okay, so some people might have been killed, but you're saying the incident that is
the incident that is trying
death of 40 people in one home, it didn't happen.
The way it's being portrayed is false.
Well, either the house was shelled or it wasn't. It's one of those things, isn't it? Either 40 people died in that house or they didn't.
Not on that day, not by our forces, and we didn't move anybody from a building to another building.
Did it happen on another day?
Could happen on another day somewhere else, maybe not 40 at the same time.
What do you think is the truth of that situation? Do you think anybody died on that day, in that incident?
I don't know.
We don't know yet.
I don't know.
The Israeli Defense Forces now say it takes the Zaytun incident very seriously and is investigating it. Whatever the outcome of their investigation, horror stories from Zaytun continue. This woman, Farai Samuni, speaking from her hospital bed, describes another attack by Israeli forces.
مرقوا علينا عنده مش وقفة لغاية باب الأوضة. لهم بيقولوا وين صاحب البيت بالعبري يعني فهم لهم أبو فرج طلع لهم عمل إيديه هيك لهم طبوا فيه في إطلاق النار عليه وقع مات. إحنا كل هيتنا في الأوضة متجمعين 20 نفر اللي هم طبوا في الأوضة برضو رشق في الأوضة طخ اللي تصاوب واللي مات. ابن جوزي مات الصغير ابني تصاوب برصاصة هان 20 سنة عمره في المستشفى. بن جوزي صاوبت كمان شظايا في راسها. ابني كمان شظايا وابني الثاني شظايا وانا شظايا. يعني بدي احكي لك مأساة كابوس كان مش مأساة كابوس كمان.
The families were then moved to another area. The young men told to strip off and the nightmare continued.
صار الشباب يشلحوا فواعيهم. كان صار يقول لنا اجروا. قعدنا نجري وين نروح يا خواجة وين نروح قال اجروا. قعدنا نجري. أنا متصابة في ظهري كنت كل ظهري مخردق مصابة في شظايا وبن جوزي بنزف في صدره وفي قلبه وفي راسه طلق وبنزف 4 سنين عمره. تمينا لتاني يوم عندهم لتاني يوم واحنا ننزف الناشد في الصليب الناشد في الهلال الناشد في الإسعاف ولا حد يرد علينا ولا حدا يقول له فيش عندكم الطريق مسكرة. تمينا لتاني يوم بن سلفي صبح تاني يوم اللي هو توفى. صرت أنا أنزف كثير من ظهري.
Red Cross workers had tried to enter the suburb, but say they were stopped by Israeli soldiers.
When we finally succeeded in going to the area, they managed to search about approximately 10 houses on that day and found dead people on mattresses, children who were extremely weak because of no food, no water, people in a very, very desperate situation.
The Red Cross says under international humanitarian law, troops must treat or allow the treatment of wounded civilians. In this case, it would appear Israeli troops made sure that neither occurred for 4 days.
What is certain is that the Red Cross is in absolute shock over this episode. It was very, very shocking to see also that there were Israeli soldiers nearby. We presume they knew very well that there were children, they were wounded, and so on inside these houses. We were even told to leave the houses and not go in there. What's very shocking to us is that that was allowed to take place.
Just beyond Jerusalem, the West Bank is what the UN calls Israel's occupied Palestinian territory. Israel uses this vast wall and more than 600 checkpoints like this one, it says, to stop suicide attacks on Jewish civilians. Inside the wall, in the city of Ramallah, I found Palestinians venting their anger at the attack on Gaza the only way they could. But there is tension here between the Palestinians themselves as well. The West Bank is ruled by the other main Palestinian faction, Fatah, bitter rivals of Hamas. And soon I found any Hamas supporters in the crowd being arrested, beaten and dragged away by Fatah's US-trained security forces. And they didn't want me filming it.
Right, so that was what looked like Fatah intelligence taking away people from the demonstration, and as I tried to film it, they grabbed and tried to destroy the camera. Told me to go back to the demonstration, not to film that.
Israel and the West would like to see the more moderate Fatah back in control of Gaza, replacing the Islamist Hamas. But some Israeli commentators believe Israel's attack on Gaza has backfired and actually strengthened Hamas. They say Israel could have done a deal with Hamas, ending the rockets by lifting a 2-year economic blockade of Gaza that's been aimed at forcing Hamas from power.
The militants, the extremists, the hatred toward Israel is today much stronger than 3 weeks ago. The Qassams didn't stop until now, and if they will stop through an agreement which we could have achieved also without this terrible war. So, by any parameter, this war was unnecessary, in my view, criminal, inhuman, maybe the most brutal and cruel war that Israel had launched ever against the Palestinian people, against civilians, against maybe the most helpless population in the world. Because I cannot recall one war in history which was launched against a people which is under siege, which lives between fences where refugees didn't even have where to run to. Unlikely the Lebanese war, where people had some kind of backyard to run to escape. In this case, those poor civilians didn't even have a place to escape to.
Yossi Alfa is a former senior Mossad official. He doubts the whole strategy of trying to undermine Hamas.
We have been singularly unsuccessful over the years whenever we attempted to manipulate the nature of a neighboring Arab regime. Go back to Lebanon in 82-83, we kicked out the PLO and got Hezbollah. We installed Bashir Gemayel as president and he was assassinated. And the rest is history, as they say. In 41 years, there have been a number of attempts to manipulate the nature of the Palestinian leadership. They all backfired. So you may, at huge effort, get rid of Hamas, but instead of successfully reinstalling the PLO in Gaza, you might get something worse. And from that standpoint, it simply wasn't worth an effort that could be totally counterproductive.
After the 3-week Israeli offensive had ended, Rayeed was reunited with his wife and children and saw for the first time the rubble that was once his home.
برجع بمشي على بيتي المهدوم اللي مش عارف اثر. انا لما جيت على المنطقه ما عرفتش بيتي وين. ما عرفتش بيتي من بيت اخوي، من بيت جارنا، من بيت ابوي، ما عرفتش حاجه. يمكن بتشوفوا هاي الفرشه هاي، لو كان الغرفه هان اولادي اللي كان بنيمهم انا، بفقدهم بامنهم في الغرفه هاي. كانت هذه غرفه الاولاد وفي غرفه للبنات، والله ما انا قادر اميزها. انا مش عارف وين اقول لك وين هي. هاي غرفتها أنا، كان غرفة البنات في المنطقة هاي، إذا كنت أنا صح.
Israel says it killed 300 of the estimated 10,000 Hamas militants and severely disrupted the ability to fire rockets. But an estimated 1,000 civilians were also killed and 5,000 wounded, many of them women and children. Senior UN officials have called for war crimes investigations. The Israeli government rejects the accusations, but some commentators are not convinced.
War crime is not a question of opinion. War crimes is a question of facts. And you name it, from the siege, which is a collective punishment, which is forbidden, to shelling civil population, which is forbidden.
Forbidden under what? Under international?
Under international law, you don't shell, you don't use cannons, you don't use tanks against heavily civilian population, heavily dense civilian population. You don't use white phosphor. You don't shell hospitals. You don't shoot convoys of supply. You don't shoot at medical crews, at ambulances. All things that Israel had done in this conflict, in this war. I mean, the list is so long. it's at least as long as the list of civilians which were killed for nothing in this war.
Thousands of Gazans have now lost their homes and their means of making a living. Rayeed Al Atamna is among them.
حتى السيارة اللي كنت أنا بعيش فيها ومتعايش منها زي ما أنتم شايفين، يعني حتى الشجرة اللي كان أبوي بزرعها مش ضايلة. صدقوني أنا ما بعرف وين بيتي، وين أنا موجود. مين بيصدق هذا صار في خلال المدة هاي؟ مين بيصدق هذا الكلام؟ هذه عائلتي 20% منها قاعدين بالشارع. هذه العائلة تبعتي، وهي بنتي بتحاول تتفقد أو تلاقي بعض الكتب تبعتها، لكن أنا ما ظنيتش تطلع بأي نتيجة. شوف شايفين هاي منظر بنتي 4 سنوات بتحاول تدور أي إشي يحميها من البرد. هي مبسوطة لقت، ما بعرفش ايش ما حفيدها. يمكن شايفين انتم كان أي بلوزة أو شيء، شايفين زي ما انتم شو فيش في رجلها شيء تلبسوه.
I think the only achievement of this war is the thousands of injured people, the hundreds of killed people, the over 350 dead children, over 50 babies, the horrible destruction that we didn't see the full scale of it yet, of Gaza, which anyhow was in a very bad condition, and more hatred toward Israel, and more revenge feelings. This is the only achievement of this war.
احنا كنا عايشين يلا كنا عايشين، ايش مصير هذول الناس والاطفال هاي؟ شو مصيرها؟